No, I think that was all good.
Well,
What
anyone
you
who's watching the recording, sorry you had to miss out on that. I'll do a recap, I think, later, but
Sorry, it's hard for me to talk. I'm in line right now.
oh no,
Uh,
you're good.
I see Nate's on here now. Nate, you just missed it, but I was telling Cameron our plan for today. And he gave some input
What
to keep it
plan?
short, like 2 seconds. We've got 2 seconds.
Just kidding.
I was
I
about to say,
was on for most of it.
dang, Nate, you two are about to get in an argument about what plan. I never said I would go with you to that. Well, okay, today though, and especially for the sake of the recording as well, I just wanted to talk kind of briefly. There's been a couple loan officers who are good loan officers that have reached out to me to talk to me about certain issues they're seeing. Another one, he and I are friends, but he owns a different mortgage company with two other guys, and they obviously they always ask my perspective because I'm a real estate agent as well. And they're like, we're having trouble with realtors keeping deals into contract and just how they're advising, or we're seeing a lot of people leave their realtor because of certain things. And so, I think and this works for how you talk with your clients, but also whenever we go to events, right? I'm trying to prepare everyone that when you're inviting people to events and they say something, like, what are you going to say back? So it's all about handling objections without being objective and combative. Same thing when you go to any Super Bowl parties and get-togethers. There's typically a lot of birthdays in spring and a lot of events. How are you talking to people? How are you preparing yourself to talk to people? We used to be in a brokerage where, and don't get me wrong, I mean, I understood initially what they were trying to say, but then people took it to a whole nother level where they had this elevator pitch. And if someone asked you, what do you do? It became this presentation of, oh, I own my own successful real estate company where I help buyers and sellers navigate the real estate. I'm like, oh God, please do not say that. When I did the network marketing in Amway, I got really good at piquing people's interest. And there was like a strategy you would take where you led the conversation by, I don't want to say being manipulative, but you're kind of being strategic on how I talk to someone. So if I ask someone, hey, what do you do for work? It's common sense and pretty typical for people to ask me what I do back, right? And so I'll ask, well, hey, what do you do for work? And they'll say, oh, I do whatever, right? And I go, oh, interesting. How do you like that? And whatever. And eventually, like, it starts to get quiet, and people will think, oh, it's quiet. What do I say now? And they're like, well, what do you do? I say, oh, I'm a full-time agent. But then I keep asking them more, full-time real estate agent. And then I ask them more about what they do because I'm interested. People will always come back and ask you, well, how's the market been? How have things been going? What do you think of the market? What do you think of where interest rates at right now? And so you got to be prepared for how you talk to people with that. The common objections I wrote down were, yes, hey, what do you think of the market right now? Like, how are you going to handle that? And you got to find a way to word it in a way that fits you. But at the same time, it's not scripted, and it's not you and clearly showboating, but you're still kind of showboating, right? So someone says to me, well, what do you think of the market? I say, well, it's really interesting right now because the news is putting out that rates are dropping, but they're really not. At the end of the day, they're going to drop because if I look at the average income and I look at how much you have to make in order to qualify for where home prices are right now, it's not exactly matching up, which makes me think that if rates drop, you're going to get so many more qualified buyers. So honestly, right now, I think it's a great time to buy because, back in 2021, everyone was competing like you wouldn't believe. And the problem was home prices home sale prices have not matched what people are bidding for. So people are having to pay a lot of extra money out of pocket. Yeah, you had a significantly lower interest rate, below 3% typically. But, in today's market, you're not competing as much. You're able to keep more money in your pocket because typically you can get credits towards closing costs, and I just feel like you're not getting screwed over as much. And I like this market better because I'm a good negotiator and I feel like I can help my clients negotiate more in today's market. Boom. See how that just, I'm not, and I sometimes I take it different directions, but I always have a general idea of what I might say when someone says something. So same thing when someone says, well, where do you think interest rates are at? Well, it really depends. Honestly, it really depends where your credit score is at. It depends if you're buying in a place with Melrose, how much you're putting down. Typically people are able to get I don't even talk about interest rates. I just say people can get a seller or a lender to pay for a temporary rate buy down where they can either get 1 or 2% for the first couple of years. That way they play the game in anticipation that rates are going to drop either fall of this year or spring of next year after the elections. So when rates drop, they can refinance, but at least they've been having 1 to 2% less. Right, that's all people need to hear. They don't need to hear about rates are at 7%. Because if I say 7 and they bought at 3%, right, they're hearing more than double the interest rate. So they're thinking in their head that their monthly payment would be more than double. But they also forget that they have natural appreciation. Some of them just have they've built equity in their property because they've made some renovations. Maybe there's some things that happen. They're in Rancho Cordova. They've just announced that there's going to be a lot of biotech companies starting construction, which means more jobs. So I think Rancho Cordova might have a big change as well. And so you're going to have parts of Rancho Cordova, they're going to have a big boost in appreciation and value. And so even though they might hear 7%, well, hey, but you have so much extra equity that you're going to put down that if you were ever looking to upgrade your house, I mean, you're going to be able to buy a house double the size with maybe 500 more per month, 1,000 more per month. I mean, it just depends. Did you get raises at your job the last 5 years? Right, probably. And so that's the conversation. Like that's the presentation I have tonight. But that's what you kind of want to talk with people about. But a lot of this has to do with the questions you ask. Like I definitely learned early on, the leader of the conversation is the one asking the questions. The second I stop talking, I say something and stop talking, and they ask a question, they're driving the conversation. So if someone says, like if someone came to me right now, and would be honest, and they said, they said I'm a full-time agent, I definitely help a lot of, I've been representing a lot of sellers, and I make the comment, oh, I would hate, I could never sell right now. Then the question should be, oh, why do you say that? I would probably say, oh, well, I'm still renovating parts of my house and I wouldn't want to sell until it was renovated. Oh, well, how far along are you and how close are you to being finished? What kind of renovations did you make? How much do you think your house is going to sell for when it's done? Have you looked at all on the market? Hey, what's your address? I'd love to just look and give you like an estimate. That way, hey, what's going on in your neighborhood? Because you might be surprised. Like, are you doing this all yourself? Are you paying for someone? Oh, I'm paying for someone. And this is what you're going to hear a lot of people say. Well, I can't do any of the renovations myself, and it's too expensive to pay someone to come in. I mean, how much are bathroom renovations going for? And they'll ask you that. And I just say, well, I'll get you a couple of quotes. Do you have money saved for these renovations, or are you wanting to do a home equity line of credit? Boom. Now you're giving them options, but you're asking the question. Does that make sense to everyone who's on the call? What are some other objections any of you have heard or heard from clients? Anything out there?
The biggest one is people, I mean, this is obvious. People don't want to give up their 2 and 3% interest rate. They don't want to sell to jump into a higher interest mortgage. That's the biggest one.
Okay, don't sell. How about just, if you have 2 or 3%, the way rent, if I'm talking to someone who said that, the way rent's been going up, I bet you can net a profit by renting it out. And actually, and this is why you want to pay attention to some of the news that's coming out, which I haven't put this out and I kept forgetting to. And actually, they just changed a lot of the rental income qualifications. So before they used to say you had to have 2 years of rental property income in order to use that as a qualification. What they would do is they would say, okay, if market rent is $2,500 a month for your house, they would take 75% of that. And that's what they would factor in as your, and remove that from your debt to income ratio. What they're doing now is if you get a lease in place and I think just a lease in place, like a signed lease agreement, they'll count that as towards your income. So if you have 2.5 to 3%, the way rental prices have been increasing, right? Because if interest rates have increased, and that means less people are buying or are able to buy, which means there's more demand for rentals. So rent has increased. I bet you're going to start making a profit if you rented it out. And then what you can do is, because you probably need some extra equity in order to purchase a house, you probably have a lot of equity. You could do bridge loans at a super low rate because it's just principal and interest in order to buy your next house if you were looking to move. But if you were to move, why would you move? Are you looking to upgrade a house or downsize, Mr. Buyer? And I would add,
I need to move my kids to a better school district, is what I hear most of the time.
Perfect. I mean, hey, if rates are too high right now, the thing is everyone is thinking that. And so there's a lot less competition. Like I bet when you bought your house, did you have to compete, when rates were 2 to 3%? The answer is probably yeah. Hey, well, what you can do nowadays is you can rent out your property, which we actually help with property management. It's easier than people think. The problem is when you hear all the horror stories, and this is absolutely true. When you hear all the horror stories, it's because no one pre-screened the client, the tenant. They just said, I want $3,000 a month for my house. And the first person that says, I have the money, here you go, they just put them in the house. And they never pre-screen. They don't do a background check, a credit pull, a job history check. Like we usually do that for people, even for free, if they let us help them purchase. But that's super easy. And then you can always sell later. The nice thing about having a rental is when you increase the rental rate, it actually increases the value as well, because investors will look at that. I mean, this is probably going too far. Like I wouldn't have this big of a conversation. It just depends how interested they seem in what I'm saying. But yeah, I mean, if you want to buy now, the great thing is you can always refinance later. The problem if you wait till rates drop, is you're just going to, so it depends, I mean, I would at least talk with someone to see what does your monthly payment look like. Because if you have a significant amount of equity, you might really be surprised how low your monthly payment is on that house in a better school district. But what's nice is everyone wants a house in a better school district, more people, more often than not. And so when rates drop, your value is going to just shoot up. And so if you refinance, you're just going to have so much of a significant, because your payment decrease because you have so much extra equity.
Yeah, and that's all good information. I also handled the objective is, okay, well, what is your plan if you stay? I mean, I assume you're probably going to pay for private school or,
Oh, hey, that's a good one.
So it's like, yeah, you could pay for that extra $1,200 a month for that education, or you could be putting that towards your equity. And I tell them the story. Chanel and I, we moved from Yuba City where we were paying over $1,000 a month for private school education, and we moved to Folsom. The education's far more superior and it's free, public, highly rated schools.
Perfect. And now everyone watching this can use that same example, but refer to Nate as a client. A client of mine moved from Yuba City. They're paying over $1,000 a month for private education. That's what I would do. I always did that back in the Amway business. I wasn't successful, so I would always talk about someone else who was successful, and I'd be like, "Oh yeah, my coach, they did X, Y, and Z." And then when you start making money, then you can refer to yourself. The same thing with this. I always carried that over into real estate. Like when I first got my license, I would hear stories that people would tell me, and so I would tell clients as if it was my client. I'd say, "Oh, I had this, I saw this happen one time where this happened." And they go, "Oh," and they look at you as an expert as if you've been in the industry for a long time, but really I'm just retelling the story that someone else told me. And I'm using that to help me, create a scenario for them in their head and an example. So that's perfect. The other thing that we also really need to get good on is it's not just about, hey, are you going to save money if you wait? But it's how much money are you going to lose if you wait? If you decide, hey, well, I want to wait till rates drop to 2 or 3%. The problem is if we have inflation of around 6% or appreciation of around 6% every year, think about every year you're waiting is 6% of values increasing that you're now having to pay more for when you do buy. Also, that's 6% of appreciation you could have in your property that you're now missing out on. So like, how much are some of the homes you've been looking at? Oh, 600,000, which is also a lot. Well, 6%, it's not, 6% increase every year. You do times 0.06 plus 600,000. Now I'm at 636 times 0.06. Let's say they wait 2 years, is another 38,160 plus 636. Right. So by waiting 2 years, you just lost out on $74,000 in an increase in value in your property. Does that make sense to everyone? Because it compounds every year. So it's like, that's one of the things that I think I never really hear people take that approach. And I think we can be very unique in that sense by saying, hey, it's not just like, well, first of all, anyone who says, well, I'm just waiting for prices to drop. Well, then move to another state that doesn't offer a lot of jobs. The thing with our state is we don't want prices to drop, because that means you're going to buy a house in a market that's very volatile because of crazy weather or no job market, right? People buy Montana, prices are always up and down because the weather is just insane. You go to like the Carolinas or some other areas, market is up and down because the job market just hasn't reflected the prices. Sometimes they get a lot of people moving because there was remote work, but now there's no remote work and there are also no jobs. So you want to buy in an area that has a good market. The other thing is that I always like to relate to people, hey, in our area, what type of buyer or what buyers will come from a certain area? What do we always complain about those buyers? Oh, it's the cash buyers from the Bay Area. What do people in Texas complain about? Oh, the cash buyers from California. Well, why are we all cash buyers? Well, because we understand, we bought in a market with good appreciation. So people who bought, at a certain price that had so much appreciation that now we have so much equity. It's the same thing that you all will hear in the presentation tonight if you're able to plug in is, sometimes people look at, oh, I want to pay as little as I can for an investment property, but it's like, yeah, but don't forget, appreciation is a percentage. So the higher the value now, when you tag on a 5% appreciation, I mean, it's just so much significantly more of an equity growth versus a cheaper property. Okay, well, I just want to buy cheap properties because I don't know why people think that. Well, because I want to make them a good rental. Well, you forget about appreciation. These are all things we just want to talk about. It's the price you pay by waiting. Especially first-time home buyers, because if I look at a first-time home buyer, I mean, most should be buying right now. And they're saying that there are a lot of first-time home buyers buying right now. Why? Because if I can at least afford it, I know when rates drop, I'm going to be able to have, I mean, it's hard to save up 20% because the problem is if appreciation is 6% every year, then that means I need to save, from my income a certain amount that supersedes the 6% of the area I live in, right? So if I live in Roseville and I want to buy in Roseville, let's say the average basic home is 500,000. Well, if I have a 6% increase every year, whatever that is, that means I need to have a pay increase or be able to save more than that every year in order to reach that 20%. And I think if you did the math or whatever percentage they want to save up for, it's like buy now, because if you can save up 3%, purchase now with appreciation the way it is and the way you're saving. Let's say you're able to save 10% of your annual income every year. Okay. So I save 10%. This is why we're going to do a class, the next Building Wealth seminar. We're going to do it with a financial advisor because they're going to talk about investing into like a 401k or an IRA, because that will have growth. So not only are you saving money every year, but you're putting it in there, which that'll have growth. But then also if you buy a house, that's going to have natural appreciation. And so this is how you grow your wealth. But this is a conversation for like first-time home buyers. Like Chase should be having this with all of his friends. Dylan should be having this with all of his friends. But really, it's true in a very interesting way of looking at it. I subscribed to it was like some free class. It wasn't exactly what they said it was, but I already knew that. Through Instagram, it was like buying commercial property online seminar, and it was like a 1 hour course for 3 days, but it was the same thing every day. So I stopped listening to it, but they talked a lot about that. They're like, if you don't have any money right now and you don't have any people that you can create an investment fund with, this is what you should be doing. I was like, oh, it's true. Okay, what are other objections? Because we can get way more basic with handling objections.
Oh, Cameron, I've heard one on social media recently, and it's even like realtors that are talking about like how they advise people to rent rather than buy. I know that's like a very common one and it's very easy to overcome, but when they point out the numbers where like, I would rather you rent, it's way easier to qualify, you could pay off debt, all that. Like, how do you combat that? I mean, it's pretty hard to, I don't know.
Well, a lot of those realtors are talking in markets that, well, it depends. It's like if the people on social media who are doing that are having probably people reach out and that they can then have a conversation with. Because if I did that and someone reached out and they said, hey, can you help me find a rental? I'll say, yeah, what are you looking for? Hey, what's your job? What's your income? What's your credit score? And I'm going to say, well, actually, you can qualify for a house. And just so you know, if you did buy a house, this is for you. Actually, it might be better to buy a house because look at the appreciation, right? Those might just be tactics to get people, right? It's kind of like a bait and switch, but sometimes it may not be. In other markets, and I actually meant to mention this yesterday, I'm going to be doing a recap video of our meeting yesterday. But one of the things Vanessa ran into was she helps negotiate her brother's rental it was like a rental listed by an owner, but she helped negotiate that. She didn't get paid because she didn't realize that you don't get paid. But what she could have done with it is she could have reached out to the rental property owner and said, hey, I see your rental has been on for a while. I have a couple clients that might be interested. If I bring you a qualified candidate, that has good credit, good job history, they've been a home buyer, so they know how to take care of a home, will you pay me a commission? How much are we talking? Hey, right? And you can negotiate that if you want to, because I know I've had in the past people reach out to ask, hey, can you help me find a rental? And I think we're starting to get into a market where you may be able to actually negotiate to get a commission for that. Otherwise, sometimes it is good just to help them find a rental because you lock them in as a client down the road. And I lost out on a client because I didn't help them find a rental and another agent did. And they literally bought 6 months later with that agent. I'm like, oh man, she was a college friend of mine too. But it's okay. But when it comes to renting, I mean, if someone just said, well, I feel like I should rent now so I can pay off debt and save up money. Well, how much are you looking to save up, right? It's the conversation. I think you're going to ask questions and realize that they don't even know, right? They just saw something on YouTube and they're like, well, I don't know. How much should I be saving? Like, how much should I save? Like, how much is it for a down payment on a house? Well, right now, because rates are high, it depends, on what your mortgage insurance is. If you go with the right lender or loan officer, they can probably get you some of the lowest mortgage insurance in the area and you can explain that if you want. But really, I mean, you could just save 3%. You could always look like, hey, what are you looking to rent? A house? Well, a house in that area goes for this. If you put 3% down, that's this. How much was your tax return? How much are you thinking you need to save? How long would it take you to save up for that? Do you have any friends or family that would lend on that? Are you a veteran? Are you a Native American? Maybe you'll qualify for, like, how much do you make? Oh, I've had people be like, oh, I make $12,000 a month, but I don't have any money saved. Okay, well, you could probably qualify for a down payment assistance program because the interest rate's a little higher, and then just refinance it later when you have a little bit of extra equity. And that way you don't have to put anything down. You'll have wait a year, or 6 months. You probably will have at least 3 to 4%, and then you can refinance to a conventional mortgage at a much lower rate. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, and sometimes you'll find people that will say things like, oh, I really need to work on my credit. Well, how bad's your credit? And I've had people say, I have no credit, right? There are loans available. The thing is, and that's what I would tell them. I'd say, well, there are loans available, even if you have no credit. I'm not kidding. There are loans available. There's a way that they do it. But I would at least talk with someone, because usually a loan officer, and this is what I would just get good at talking up someone else. You know, a good loan officer, like some of the ones I work with, they can help you fix your credit in 3 months and get it to a point where it also saves you thousands of dollars when you do decide to buy, which is true. There's super easy things that people don't know about. But the more, I think that there's a lot of value in, like, Dylan, I know you had brought up getting your mortgage license to double in both deals. I had a broker in Southern California that I met back at UWM, one of the banks, and he didn't know. So he's a licensed realtor and a mortgage lender. He didn't know he could represent both. And I said, well, the thing is it's a lot tougher to do that. And he goes, well, how? I should be doing that. He called me recently. He goes, it's a lot harder because I have to sell myself. And I'm realizing that whenever I sold a realtor, or when I was the realtor and I sold a loan officer, it was just really easy to talk up someone else, and they were more likely to listen to me versus when I talk myself up, they just think I'm arrogant. And it's very true. You know, when I talk up someone, they're like, oh, you really recommend them? I'm like, seriously, they will seriously fix your credit so fast, and they're going to save you thousands of dollars. I mean, they're really, really good at what they do, and they'll get excited about talking to that person. Like when I was in Amway, we always made it a point to talk up someone else, and rather than myself, and set up a meeting, because they almost felt like a privilege to be able to talk to that person. If that makes sense.
That actually makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah. But with that, with the renting thing, the thing is, I mean, I would almost ask people, well, how much are you renting, or how much are you saving right now? I mean, rent does increase. Technically, they can increase it by 10% every year. Like, do you save 10% of your paycheck every month? Like, you know, I think really almost segueing it of like, oh, save up. Yeah. Well, how much are you getting from your tax return this year? Right. That's what I would say. Well, how much do you currently have saved? Like, almost like steer away from that conversation and say, you know, yes, a rental right now might be $1,700 a month, but people don't buy homes to save money every month in their monthly payment. People buy homes so their payment's fixed, you know, and rentals are always going up every single year. And so your payment is not set, whereas for your home, it is set. And if you ever refinance, you can actually lower your monthly payment. But also, people buy property because of the equity. And then I would go right into thinking about the Bay Area, because if you're talking with someone who's younger, they're going to understand, like, you know, you get the tech people in the Bay Area who buy $1 million properties because they know that after a couple of years, they have so much appreciation and increase in value that they can sell and pay cash for somewhere else. That's what's nice about being in California. And I just would always word it that way to those, you know, people. Is that helpful, Chase? I know he's at the store or something.
Yeah, that was good. Thank you. It was I don't know, it's like a big thing right now where they're talking about, like, exactly like you said, you know, some rents are like 1,700, and then you buy the same house and it's like 25 or something.
Yeah, but what I would almost say is, okay, if I were to buy the same house, but do you need a house right now? Like, where can you start? Like, can you start with, like, do you need a 3-bed, 2-bath house, or can you do a 2-2? It's $150,000 less, and that's move-in ready. That way you're at least comfortable, but might need some updates. Because if you can just buy that place, you're going to have appreciation later, and then you can always upgrade to buy that next house.
So it's kind of like the buy what you can afford, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not about, like, and like I said, I mean, if you get good at wording it, like tonight's seminar, a lot of it's gonna be, listen, if you're just looking to buy a house, you should think of yourself as a real estate investor. And that's how we should be treating everyone and wording everything is, people don't buy homes to save money. People buy homes for equity growth, to lock in their payment so that in 10 years, they could always refinance and really lower their monthly payment, or it gives them more options, right? I could pay for my kid to go to college. I can go to college. I can pay for a wedding. I can get a home equity line of credit and renovate my house. And I mean, there's so many things you can do. You can rent out a room. You can do whatever you want. With rentals, you can't do that.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good argument. Thank you.
Yeah.
I've got a question about refinancing.
Yeah.
Is it really that easy and like accessible to buyers? And like, how exactly do they save money from that?
Okay, so great question. So if you think about mortgages are typically, I mean, obviously there's 15, 25 or 20, 25 and even 40-year term mortgages, but most mortgages are 30 years, right? And so if I buy now and I refinance in 2 years, it also, that new mortgage pays off the existing one and it extends. So it goes where I only had 28 years. Well, now it goes to another 30 years, but that means that the monthly payment would decrease, if that makes sense, because it's dragged out over a longer period of time. So your monthly pay, it's simple math. A lot of times I get people who say, oh, mortgages, the way they structure it is you pay a lot of the interest up front. I'm like, no, it's just math. The way you break up something over 30 years, you pay a lot of interest up front because the balance is higher. I mean, once the balance decreases and you pay less interest, but if the monthly payment stays the same, then you're paying, it's just, it's math. It's not that no one structured it that way. It's just math. So yes, with refinancing, the nice thing is there's not a lot of requalification. So like there's VA IRRRLs is what they call them. I constantly forget what it's IRRL. But basically, we don't look at their income anymore. We just look at, it's just called rate and term. So you'll hear about rate and term refinance. So it just means rates have improved. They do a general credit pull to make sure, hey, they still have that. And then they just refinance that. They make sure they're still employed and then they refinance. So it is easier, but it's not like purchasing a house. If they take cash out, it's a little different. Right, Chanel and Nate? I mean, you two have done a refinance. Was it easier than purchasing? Oh, they're not listening.
No, we are listening. Sorry, you just had to get to my microphone.
Okay.
Yeah, it's way easier.
Yeah. I mean, and they change how they do it constantly, right? Usually lenders, like right now, the bank I use, UWM's coming out and they're saying, hey, it's hard to explain how they're doing this, but they're lowering the cost of, so basically they're offering, it's hard to explain. They're offering like costs, how do I put it? In order to buy, when you get an interest rate, it comes at a cost. And so typically just a standard interest rate, like with just a flat cost, is going to be like 2 or around 3%, let's say, of the purchase price, or 2.75% of the purchase or of the loan amount is going to be the cost to get that. So essentially, they're offering big discounts in order to get a much lower rate and refinance right now, because they know that they can cut operation costs because it's just so much easier, right? They don't have to go through and re-verify a ton of stuff. You're not having to put any money down. It just has to be a benefit towards the borrower in order to refinance. So people who have to jump through all these hoops, I mean, if you refinance from FHA to a conventional, then that's going to be a little bit different, but it still is going to be significantly easier. Plus, you've been making payments on your mortgage, which they're going to always look at that as a huge bonus in qualifying you because you've made consistent payments. and you've proved you can handle the debt. So why would they not offer you a lower payment and take you on? Because now you're considered like a credible, more credible homeowner. Whereas before it's like, well, based on what we figure for debt to income and qualification purposes, we think you can handle this payment, but we'll have to see, as you go. And once you've been handling those payments, once you refinance, like that's how they essentially kind of look at it, if that makes sense. But if someone said, is a refinance really that much easier? Yes. It's like half the paperwork. It's half the stuff you have to do to qualify. Because as long as it's a net tangible benefit to you, then they're going to do it. They're going to allow it. So, I mean, unless if the value decreases, but that's a whole nother story. Okay, what's another objection you guys are hearing? If no one has one. I hear one a lot is people just constantly talking about, well, what if prices drop? What if prices drop? Just remember to always go back and say, and you don't want to be combative, right? And so being combative is, prices are not going to drop. It's more like, well, I do think, and this is true, I do think prices could drop, but they would drop for properties that are on busy roads and in bad areas or are severely neglected, because just like when people have to justify the cost, they're not going to justify it when those other factors are in play. So if I have to spend more money, if I'm by a busy road, it's harder to justify, to Nate's point, over double the interest rate on a property. But people still want to buy houses. People still have to move for whatever reason. There's still divorces. There's still deaths in family. There's still people who are eager to buy a house. So the thing is houses that are well kept in decent areas are going to hold their value, pending some crazy something, right? The problem with 2008 was there were subprime lenders and subprime loans. There was also RESPA did not exist. And so there are like almost 100 mortgage and real estate related laws that came out of 2008 to prevent that from ever happening again. So unless if we went into World War III, don't really anticipate in our market with good jobs a huge decrease in prices. There is always the affordability index. So if I look at, okay, if the average home price in Roseville is $500,000 and you need to make, let's say, $100,000 in order to qualify for that property with 5% down, 3% down, whatever it is, and the average income is $70,000, that's a big issue, right? But if the average household income in our area is 150, 160, then it makes sense, right? We can still have pricing increases. Does that make sense to everyone? Like if I looked at Boise, Idaho, in the outskirt areas, they were getting a lot of people who were moving there for retirement and paying cash for houses. So it was increasing the prices. But the way that the prices increase is in order to qualify for those home loans, for basic home loans, I mean, you have to be making significantly over the median income. Parts of Sacramento have been doing that, and that's why some areas they kind of stalled out and they stopped increasing. Like they never hit over 500,000. They've stayed at that high to low fours because of median income. Make sense? I know this is like higher level talk, but this is where we have to become more industry professionals too. I will say there are going to be some news that you're going to hear, and I did want to talk about this because Alethea, I don't know if she's going to watch this recording or not, but she's new to the brokerage. She and I had a good talk last night. She just joined. She has been with Keller Williams, and we brought up the whole NAR lawsuit And she gave me some insight on something that I didn't even think about. And Adrian and Olga, they've experienced this as well, being with Keller Williams, is that they teach you never to drop your commission, never reduce your commission. They teach that and they teach that. Then what happens is people will come and promote their upcoming listings in the office, and then they really encourage their sellers to go with an agent who's selling who has a buyer in the office interested in their properties. They never really go on the market. The problem with that is now if you're teaching someone to never reduce their commissions and you're also selling things off market, it definitely is fixing. I mean, you can kind of debate it, but I do feel like that's definitely fixing fixing commissions. So what does that mean for us? If you guys hear of anyone in the news, if anyone brings this up in a conversation, because they're going to start hearing about it a little, I do think now, realizing that there might be a good chance some of these lawsuits are going to go through, is just, if people bring up those conversations, hey, aren't realtors commissions about to go down? Well, actually, this is what people were doing. Like our brokerage, we're willing to offer, discounts in our commission for certain reasons. Like if you want to use me to buy, I'll reduce my commission for helping you sell, right? And you can word however much you want to reduce your commission, or I'll give you a credit towards closing costs when you purchase. Like, I think it's going to help us open the door for more conversations, if that makes sense. Does anyone have any thoughts about that specifically or questions? The thing with, there's going to be new ones. You're going to see a lot of stuff. And I'd rather say this ahead of time. Come March or April, you're going to see the Department of Labor really cracking down on a lot of these brokerages. So for anyone who goes 2 months of missing their brokerage dues, I have to cut your access, because if the Department of Labor ever came, they're going to say, oh, you're giving free tools and resources to this realtor. Therefore, that's an employee, and you owe, from when they started, you owe back workers' comp insurance and employment tax, like whatever employment tax is on any of their income. And I have to pay minimum wage dating back to when someone first started. You're going to see a lot of brokerages really struggle with this, because a lot of them do take an approach of making meetings mandatory, requiring certain things that are definitely, you would be considered an employee. So just be prepared. We're all going to hear this in the news come April, because they're really cracking down. I'm surprised it's not talked about more. All right. Well, that's it, everyone. Unless you all have any more objections or anything, I always love talking about this stuff. And if you have a weird objection, but just if you can always take the approach of asking the question or even trying to clarify what they're saying, because usually what someone says, they're just kind of regurgitating something else. And sometimes they totally change what they were even thinking before. Like I've had people that said, oh, I'm not qualified to buy right now. And I say, oh, what makes you think you're not qualified? Well, someone told me I wasn't qualified because of my job history. I'm like, oh, well, what's your job history? And they're like, well, I had just started a new job, and so they told me I had to be there for 2 years before I can buy. Boom. I know that's not true. I go, ooh, that's actually not true. What did you do before that? Oh, I worked these jobs. So you're telling me you have 2 years of work history, just not 2 years at your current employer? Yes. Is your current employer seasonal? Is it tips? Or is it set hours? Set hours. You're qualified to buy. That's actually not correct. That was probably a loan officer who was new to the industry or just didn't know what they were talking about. I have a good loan officer that you should definitely talk to if you're still thinking about buying, because right now is a great time. And there you go. So just try to get good at asking more clarifying questions, I think, for people, because sometimes I've had people even stump themselves, right? The whole, oh, I should move into an apartment, somewhere to save money. Well, how much are you thinking you need to save in order to buy? I guarantee you most people are going to say, actually, I have no idea. How much do I need to save? Like, don't I need 10% or 20%? Well, what's the purchase price you're wanting to buy? Yeah, Nate, were you going to say something?
I was gonna say a lot of people do think it's 20%. You know, I hear a lot.
Yeah. So even in our seminar tonight, I'm going to be talking about like Connie and Tim, you know, an older couple, never bought, which, oh my gosh, Chanel went through so much with them, but they were a good example. And actually I had like a string of like 5 different borrowers that all did the same thing, where I looked at it and they're like, well, I want to put 20% down. I'm like, why 20%? They go, well, I don't want mortgage insurance. Okay. Well, you're looking at a $500,000 house. So you do know if you put 2% less, that's an extra $10,000 in your pocket. You would have mortgage insurance, but that's roughly, both of them, it was $18 a month. I'm like, so, you know, $10,000 divided by $18 is like 100 and something months. So that means, you know, you putting an extra 10,000, it would take, like, you're kind of throwing away money. So why not put 18% down? The reason why I said that to those people is I just said, listen, if you want to put 20% down, it's totally fine. But if you want to put 18% down and save $10,000 towards some renovations, I think that's a really good idea, especially as you're looking at houses and you see that there might be houses that need updates. So I can always do another quote with less down. So Chase and I had Marcus Wong. So Marcus, same thing. He wanted to put I think he said he had 20% initially, and then I talked to him about it, and I think he ended up putting 8% down. But that extra money, he knew it was better for him to save that so that he can make certain renovations, and he did not care because he ended up buying at a lower price range than initially. He was able to make a better decision that fit his goals. Whereas I think when people get the tunnel vision on 20%, they're like, oh, but I also have to spend 10,000 to upgrade this. I got to spend another 10,000 to upgrade that. It's like, or you could put 4% less down. Sure, your mortgage insurance is going to be $20, $30 a month, but there's your 20 grand on a $500,000 purchase. If that makes sense to everyone. But all right. I'm going to finish our presentation for tonight. I hope you all can make it, because I do think half of the presentation tonight is going to be good for you to be able to do with buyers, and then the other half is like first-time home buyers or people who haven't bought in a while. But then the second half is going to be really good for you to talk with people on a higher level who are more investors. Even if it's just some general information, you just pick up a couple nuggets here and there, I think it'll be helpful. I will record it so you all can watch it later. But yeah. All right. Talk to you all later.
Yep. See you later.
All right. Thanks, Cameron. See you later.
Bye.